This video is for people who know something is up, but have no idea what's causing it, no idea why they do some of the things they do, or respond or react in some of the ways they react. You know this happens because of your experience throughout your life. That's assuming you're aware of what's going on around you, that is. You know because of responses you get from your actions. You know because of your observations of people around you who rarely have the courage to tell you how they experience you. There's this continuous desire to be nice, when sometimes the best thing you can do for somebody is tell them how you experience them. Not make them wrong for it, but tell them how you experience them. I hear a lot about childhood experiences, especially on Facebook, and people, especially coaches, for example, they've been taught to share their stories. That's your way of getting connected with people. So I've heard a lot about childhood experiences and the stories from people who are hooked on something like alcohol or drugs, or were hooked on alcohol or drugs. In some ways, I'm jealous because they know what they are dealing with, whereas I don't. I really have no idea. I just am the way I am. I also know the amount of abuse that is allowed to exist today because people keep refusing to listen to children's pleas. I don't know if I suffered physical abuse as a child, and if I did, I'm talking about sexual abuse. I certainly suffered other abuse, but I don't know about sexual abuse as a child. And if I did, it's been shut out of my conscious memory. In the past, when I've had a habit like biting my nails or smoking, I found a way to stop. The problem is when you don't know what's happening or what is causing your actions. At this point, let me share that I've had a heart problem since birth. It has some responsibility for how I performed, but nobody can be blamed because it wasn't medically acknowledged until many years later. I did raise issues about my breathing, but everybody, including my doctor, said it was hogwash. So although I didn't feel good, and I often struggled, especially with running and exercise, people didn't listen, and I assumed there was something about me being lazy or whatever, because I was always told I was lazy. I've spent years and years reading, participating on workshops, and experiencing a full range of healers and therapies. I mean, you name it, I've probably done it. Many of the healers said, no problem, they can fix it. And yet most, like the hypnotist who said they could hypnotize anybody, he even failed to get anywhere close to a cause. The hypnotist even tried hard to convince me I was hypnotized. I knew I wasn't. The closest I got to any possibility through all the work that I did was being told something serious happened in the first few years of my life, but never any more detail. They were right in some respects, because there was a lot that happened in my early first few years. But what can anybody do with that? It's all very well someone saying that, but that's not healing you. That's just telling you something that you really know already. It's like saying you've had an accident, but can't tell you any more than that. Yeah, really. Let me share a little of my early childhood. I was born in London, England, 1945. The year World War II ended. I was probably being carried while the Germans were bombing London, and I was in London, obviously. Sometime in the first 6 months, I was sent to kindergarten, but have no recollection of ever having been there. All I can remember is my mother saying many years later, and I mean many, many years later, that there was trouble, but that was all, no detail. I've got no idea what happened at kindergarten. My mother was like that. No, nothing wrong. No, talking nonsense or anything. That's the sort of things you used to say, oh, you're talking nonsense. During my first 2 years, I was emotionally tormented by my older brother. On more than one occasion, after being manipulated and pushed into doing things that I didn't want to do by him, I ran home, cut to pieces one day because of what he'd done. And my mother said, "Stop wasting my time." So there I am, not even 2 years old, covered in blood from head to toe. Stop wasting my time. At 2 years old, I was put into boarding school 365 days a year. I was the youngest person in a mixed group of around 20 to 25 children. I remember one day clearly, I was cowering in the corner of the dormitory, being teased and bullied by the other boys. I can even almost visualize it today. It was so bad, a teacher had to come in and they pulled me out of the dormitory and put me in a bedroom of my own. I'm not sure if letting me work it out wouldn't have been better, learning to defend for myself instead. But what they did is they separated me from the rest. You can imagine how the other kids saw this. Someone with their own bedroom. I only remember one time in my life when I really felt happy and playful. I was less than 2 years old. Unfortunately, it didn't last long. I won't share the details, but something happened and I was in serious trouble. It was so innocuous. Any child, it could happen, just an accident. You couldn't imagine someone doing the same thing today ever getting told off for such a silly thing. Something any child could do. Instead, I was admonished, drawn and quartered by both the school and my parents, who they called. Around this time, my brother had his first attempt at killing me, and I still have the scars in my head to prove it. I was only 3 years old, and yet the emotional damage was already done. I have to assume that I had a brain at the time, and it decided nobody would ever get close enough to hurt me again. The thing is, you don't know at this age what your brain is really doing because you're not cognizant yet. But that decision is still with me today. Throughout my life, I didn't know this. And slowly I learned that I'm responsible for my life. I'm responsible for everything that goes on in it. I began to see, despite my ability to make friends easily, and that's always been the case, they never lasted. I realized it had to be me, because people liked my company, but only for so long. What was I doing? Well, I was actually shutting down if anybody got too close. I wasn't allowing anybody to get that close. It's automatic. I shut off my feelings to avoid any potential for future pain. This wasn't a choice. It was a subconscious driver that is permanently on lookout. It happened, and I didn't comprehend what was happening. Eventually, a few years ago, this became clearer and clearer to me. And the best decision I made was to accept this is who I am. I developed a strong sense of self. I began to free myself up from perfection and experience people in different ways. I became a lot less judgmental and focused more on connecting with people to understand more. Even if I didn't feel connected, I could still learn to connect through understanding. The deep down beliefs and the protection set up in my first few years is clearly still there. And it may always be. It's still very hard to connect with my feelings, to the point that I wonder if I have any at times. I see people on programs like Family Feud. Can't believe how berserk the competitors go, even when they lose. I'm sure they're on drugs or alcohol. What's important is that despite this, I now have a stronger sense of self and enjoy life. I can look back and say, despite this unwanted limitation, I've had the strength to keep going. I've achieved a lot and traveled to many places in the world. I also have my fair share of successes. I love it when people get opportunities to achieve their dreams. I love it when people do amazing things for people just because of who they are and for no other reason. It brings tears to my eyes when this happens, and at that moment, I have a fleeting glimpse of my feelings for a change, because clearly, sometimes the real you can't always hide. There is clearly a key that does the trick. And I guess the trick is finding the key as often as possible. If anybody out there is struggling and doesn't really know why, if what you do is not acceptable to other people, if people call you names or give you descriptions or labels that hurt, learn to know yourself. Get to know yourself and the powerful person you are capable of being. Listen to these people and feel sorry for them. That's the people who label you, because they're also in pain. They are not taking responsibility for their pain and make you their scapegoat. I know some people have gone too far, and whatever they do will probably not be capable of recovery. It's sad, but shouldn't stop us trying to support everybody who is trying to manufacture a life for themselves. Only when someone is destructive and incapable of changing and a danger to society is it necessary to do something about it. And we know there are a lot of abusive people, for example, that need to be weeded out. We don't need them. I have no time for people who want to abuse children, who want to use their weight, their force, their power to abuse little children. It just must not happen. The first step for anybody struggling with an issue is to accept openly that you have an issue. Own it. The second is talk to people and listen. Not to people who want to fix you or tell you what you need to do. People who are capable of listening and help you understand yourself more. People who ask you questions that help you see more. Thank you. To those that got to this point, I wish you all and everybody else the best life possible. In the meantime, have this laugh on me as I deliver a couple of statements that actually reflects the kind of cheeky person I am. Teacher, how old is your father? Kid, he's 6 years. Teacher, what? How is this possible? Kid, he became father only when I was born. That's kids. Teacher, Clyde, your composition on my dog is exactly the same as your brother's. Did you copy his? Clyde, no, sir. It's the same dog. That's all, folks.